Well, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I know our lives are really busy these days, and yours is certainly no exception. So I never take for granted when you choose to spend your valuable time here. And I always reach out to get really interesting guests that are going to elevate your life to allow you to negotiate your best possible life. And today is certainly no exception. Today we have the pleasure of meeting with Stephen Seidel. And we're going to be talking about reinventing the narrative, negotiating with vulnerability, with storytelling, with authentic connection, all things that are going to help you have a better life. So, welcome, Stephen. I'm so glad to get you here.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It's an honor to be on your show. And thank you, listeners, we all have valuable time. And so thank you for investing your time in us. And hopefully there's some insights you can glean from our discussion.
Yeah, I have no doubt you've got such an interesting background. And for those of you who may not know Stephen, he's a TEDx speaker, a keynoter, a media expert, a brand strategist. He's also founder of the award-winning Seidel Agency. He spent over 25 years helping entrepreneurs, startups, HR leaders to be able to drive cultural alignment and more authentic leadership. And goodness knows we could use that. What really first caught my eye, though, is that Steve is also the co-founder of Gent's Journey, which is a men's collective dedicated to redefining masculinity through vulnerability and connection. So, those of you who've been following me a while will know that definitely got my alarm bells going as something that I was really interested in. He's also a best-selling author, a podcast creator, and he blends humor and heart. And you're going to see today, you're going to get some actionable tools to help you in whatever leadership role you choose to take to be able to rewrite your story and leverage connection as currency. So Stephen, your career spans, PR, marketing, media, leadership
Yes.
coaching. I could have gone on in the introduction, but we would have used
Thank
up
you.
all our time. What was the turning point for you that inspired you to move from sort of mainstream media strategy into, I would call what you do a deeper work of helping people rewrite their stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. And typically, when people ask me how did it all start, I usually go back to the beginning. When I was younger, my parents divorced when I was one. And so that divorce really put this people pleaser initiative in me. And I felt that I had to please my mom, please my dad, be the connective tissue. And so that started me along this path of connection, right? Eventually, now I'm a recovering people pleaser. But as you begin to go along your path, oftentimes you look at any movie. If you see a movie where somebody is stuck with something challenging, just like Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey,
Yeah.
they find a friend. And that friend became my mother. She became, my confidant that we went through life and went through a lot of individual struggles together. My dad was there, but he was often traveling. And that created this dream for me to be a great father. I wanted to be a great father for my children when I had them, which I do now,
Yeah.
future generations, as
Right.
well as the vulnerable children within us. And oftentimes we go back and say, hey, talk to your teenager and tell them what
Yeah.
you want them to hear. So that is what put me on this journey. And that created something within me where I wanted to do good, give back, and really make an impact. And so to be of service, for me, it was helping others and helping them achieve their dreams.
Yeah.
And so, that's what ultimately put me on this path. And then later on in life, I found I was an actor, I was an engineer, and I took my left brain and my right brain and said, look, I can no longer be giving my power away. I face rejection on a regular basis, especially from a performance perspective.
Yeah.
And so that can be challenging. And so I said, what can I do to put myself in a position of power? And then ultimately it turned into, I'm going to create my own content.
Yeah.
And so back around 2010, this is when YouTube was in its infancy. I started creating my own show. Actually, it was 2008, but 2010 I sold a show.
Yeah.
And that's where it was, how can I tell the story that I want to tell or the stories that I want to tell about adversity, about artistry, about life. And so that's when I realized the power of content, the power of storytelling, and the power of connection. And so for me, it's all about connection as currency. We can connect to ourselves, our calling, our mission. And then I brought that into when I created an agency where I typically go through 4 steps. We start with your mission. Then we really want to get clear on what is your message? What are you sharing? What are you telling people? And then after that, we focus more on the media or your community. And then we want to build a movement because we want that 1+1 = 3 so that people
Yeah.
can vote with their dollar, vote with their clicks. They can listen to your podcast. And
Yeah.
and so that's how that came along. And
Awesome.
with the men's group, this is a little bit of a longer answer, but I did lose my mom. My mom was in 2020. You
Yeah.
guys all know about the pandemic and COVID and how that started. I relocated from California to Kentucky. Big change. Took my company. It's a virtual PR and media company. We've worked with Coca-Cola, Amazon, all sorts of, Fortune 500 brands. But we are virtual. So I moved cross country from with my job, with my company, with a 1 month old baby.
Wow.
And then I found out my mom had cancer. And it was, oh man, I remember I was on a coaching call with Tony Robbins, and she called me and told me the news. I talk about it in my TEDx talk. But then she took my extra bedroom that my business was currently running out of because we just relocated. So I was running my business out of my laundry room,
Yeah.
and it was the hardest. It was the most challenging. I was literally putting like my logo up behind me on the white wall so that it didn't look like I had these a
Hide the
dryer,
washing
a
machine.
washer.
Yeah.
The washer and the dryer were literally right over here, but for
Yeah.
me, I had no other options. This is what I needed to do. I needed to provide for my family. And being a man, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to open up. And I didn't want to burden my wife.
Yeah.
My best friends were just too busy. And so I thought, what can I do here? I have no friends. The world's shut down.
Yeah.
I can't go to people's houses. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to create my own group of growth-minded friends. And so that's when my men's group started. And we've been in existence for 5 years now. But that's how Jen's journey started because I needed a safe space to share things.
Yeah.
And so
Well, we'll
that's
definitely
how
be
I really
unpacking
shifted.
some of that. Like I just, you talk about somebody who totally uses, as you say, left brain, right brain, across it. You talk about engineering and acting. It's incredible. And I just want to go back and put a pin in something when you talked about that sort of vulnerable child inside ourselves, because I think we often forget that. And a lot of our workshops is talk about finding that mama bear inside ourselves to protect our own inner child, right? To if we
Sure.
advocate for ourselves the way we do for others. So, and I want to start with sort of this idea about rewriting our stories, and you've helped countless people do that. And it struck me, in many ways, that's sort of the ultimate negotiation, right? Renegotiating the narrative that we tell ourselves and others. How do you guide people through that process? What are some tips?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you talk about the vulnerable child, there's a really great book. It's called Embracing Ourselves by Hal Stone. That was a book that was encouraged to me when I was an actor because we really wanted to find these different roles that we're playing in our lives. And at the end of the day, we are all one, we're all connected, but we play different roles. And so having awareness around these roles, and that's what applies a little bit more towards when we work with if you're a CEO of a company or a founder of a startup and we start working together, we want to really understand what is the story, first and foremost, that you've been telling yourself. What are some of those limiting beliefs?
Yeah.
So for me, being a people pleaser, searching externally for validation or filling the void or, having to be famous because otherwise no one will like me. But we
Yeah.
can't believe our own thoughts because they come on a frequent basis. So why should we rest our laurels on other people's thoughts?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we do when we're working through that is really understanding the story that we're telling ourselves. And the majority of our success is going to be mental. It's going to be the mindset that we position and how we formulate that. And so getting under understanding of, what are the roles that we have? What are the story that we built around those individual roles? And then after that, we really want to plug into like I said before, your mission. What is your why, like Simon Sinek would say, or what is your purpose? And we go a little bit deeper where you can create a Venn diagram and you can look in what are your skill sets, what are your passions, what is your unique access points, or where you're uniquely positioned, so that we can fine tune that. Because sometimes people go all in on passion, but that might not be the right fit because you have a different set of skills, or you maybe have unique access and you've been working in med tech for so many years, and then all of a sudden you say, well, I'm going to go do a job on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at that Venn diagram. We're going to get a better understanding of where you're at. What is that story that you've been telling yourself, and get you in a position where you realize that the moment that you can embrace adversity and vulnerability and transparency with who you are and your journey, both as a company or an organization, that's where truth growth lies, and that's where true connectivity lies because
Yeah.
we can have an emotional connection to you in that story.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about building a movement, it's moving us emotionally, it's moving us physically, it's moving us with your story that you're sharing. And then we want to build your story and figure out who you are. Where have you come from? And especially in today's day and age, my father worked at the same job for 30 years. He worked for
Yeah.
Sperry, he became Univac, he became Unisys. It's
Yeah.
a much more fragmented world. Careers are different, technology is drastically changing. And so finding ways that we can embrace those wins or embrace the histories or the losses and tie that into our story as we move forward, then we can identify the values and beliefs and make sure that there's a cultural alignment with you and your company. And then once we have that, then we can better understand what is that message when you speak towards the story or the narrative. There's a multitude of ways we can do that. For example, I help X do Y so that Z. That's just a simple elevator pitch.
Yeah.
We can dive a little bit deeper into metaphors, but that's where we figure out that message. And then once we have that, we can get a better understanding of the community and the people that you're going to connect and share that with.
Oh, good. And I love even taking that down to sort of the basic level as well. When we talk about rewriting our stories, I think even just recognizing both the positive and in particular the negative stories we tell ourselves and getting aware so we can rewrite all of those negative stories that we keep living into over and over again with all those negative thoughts. So super powerful on the personal level and also as you're sharing on that professional level to be able to build that brand in a way that's going to connect. And speaking of connection, I think you've mentioned it already, and I know in your work you emphasize that connection is currency. So in negotiations, and I think, all of life is a negotiation, so whether in the boardroom or in personal lives, how does cultivating that genuine connection change the balance of power, if you will, especially in a world where we're increasingly dominated by AI, by automation? What are your thoughts on that?
Just to touch really quickly before we get into the connection as currency, we talked about really connecting to who are the loves or things that are good and the bad stories that we're telling ourselves. A lot of these things can be shaped through society, through friends, and having an awareness and reflecting. So one of the things that we focus on is my mission is to do good, give back, make an impact, but we want to go from good to great.
Yeah.
And I use an acronym when I'm working with individuals, and this also applies to connection as currency. But the G stands for gratitude, being grateful for what we have. So we don't have to go to work, we get to go to work. And then
Yeah.
we become a little bit more connected to what our purpose is and
Yeah.
the opportunities that lie. The R stands for reflective, and that's having an understanding, like you talked about. What are the negative stories that we're telling ourselves? What are the positive stories that we're telling ourselves? There's a really great book. It's called The Artist's Way, The Spiritual Guide to Higher Creativity by Julia Cameron. And she talks about writing 2 pages every morning. It's a stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's getting that junk out of your head. And that's getting the busy noise out of our head so that we can be reflective. And then you'll notice different things coming up. Also, meditation is a really great way to really clear that noise so that we can really think and become connected. The E stands for ethical. We want to be ethical and we want to be trustworthy towards our approach and come from the heart. And so we get out of our head and into our heart, and then we come from happiness, not for happiness. And that's where, when we understand and have that reflection in our lives, and we have a note on our cell phone where we understand when do we light up? What are those moments that we just, we're in the flow and we're in there for 10, 15, 20 hours. That's another place where we're connected. And then the A stands for accountability. When we are accountable for our actions, we say what we do what we
Yeah.
say. I come from Philadelphia. That's a big thing. We're only as good as our word. Big
Yeah.
Eagles fan, go Birds. And then the T is transformational. So from good to great, when we can get into that realm, then we can really connect a little bit deeper to the negative stories, to the positive stories, and then get a better understanding of how we can use that connection as currency.
Yeah.
And so when we shift, for example, there's a really great activity in The Artist's Way where she asks you to think about, what did you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
She tells you to pick 5 individual professions and then start to incorporate them into your daily life.
Yeah.
And so when we talked about earlier, when if you were in med tech or you're a CEO, but you wanted to flip your career, there's ways that you can bring these pieces from your former life or your interests into your daily life. For example, I love magic, so I like to do card tricks. We'll do
Well,
one later
yeah.
with Cindy. And so that connection as currency, we can connect to our calling. That connects us to who we are, what is our purpose, and then we can take that and connect on a deeper level to our community.
Yeah.
So who is the community that we're looking to serve? And then that's going to allow us to really become, position our Rolodex, if you will, or actually give back, have a socially conscious component. And then lastly, we want to connect deeper to our company. And that company could be you, your organization. But what we're looking to do is create a win-win-win. And then connection as currency. We talk about sales, we talk about marketing, we talk about impact, we talk about influence. To me, they're all one and the same
Yeah.
because we're driving change, we're doing meaningful work. But it all starts with connection. And so when we're connected to who we are, we love ourselves, it flows out. We
Yeah.
connect to our company, we're culturally aligned, and then we can connect to our community and create that win-win-win.
Yeah. And I want to really hammer down on that. For our listeners, I want you to take a moment and absorb what Steve was saying there, because we are sadly in a state where there is, in many ways, less connection than we've seen in a long time. We're seeing this increased polarization. And I love your acronym with the GREAT. And I want to put a pin for our listeners as well. And this idea about the trust, when Steve was talking about have that trust. That starts with ourself as well. And I think we often forget that. We definitely need to build trust with others. And that starts by trusting ourselves, which ties to that accountability piece that Stephen was talking about. That, when we say what we mean and we mean what we say and we keep our promises to ourselves, we can build that trust ourselves, which allows us to show up, in a place of integrity, being true to ourselves. So I really wanted to put a pin in that. And I want to just switch gears for a second, see, because I don't think I mentioned in the introduction, but you've also done a lot of work or at least speak to the hidden power of grief. I think so often people get lost in it. I think as a society, globally, we're seeing a lot of grieving about the state of the world right now.
Sure.
How did your own experience shape your perspective about the power of grief, and what does it look like, I guess, to regenerate our relationship with grief so we can alchemize the grief, if you will, into growth and, presence
Yeah.
and authentic leadership?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking. That's what I essentially built. When I talked about growing up, I was a people pleaser. My mom became my best friend. And then as I grew older, I lost my dad in 2019. And a friend of mine said, look, you're never really a man until you lose your father or a parent for that.
Yeah.
Because if you think of, you always feel like your parents are going to be there. And so for those who still have your parents, reach out, connect with them, relish those moments
Yeah.
with them. But as they begin ascending or moving on to the next stage in life, then you step up. I have two children. So now I want to put myself in a position where I'm protecting them and I'm leaving a lasting legacy. And so when I lost my mom, it was a really tough moment for me. And so what I did in that moment is I said, look, I joined a group. It was called Meditation Hill Sangha. And it's where just people get together and they talk about living in the moment. And there's a bunch of different things that we have, like a three-word mantra. There's, a 6-second sacred pause that we can respond versus react. But the core of it is all about sharing and learning about how we can remain in the present moment and realize that everything is unfolding for us, not
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah.
And so it's all, putting us on the path that we're at. And as part of that process, I realized that I was in a tough space. And like I said, I created that men's group and I created a 3-step process. I love different frameworks. And what I did was first, I realized that I needed to reconnect because I felt disconnected that my mom had passed on and that she was no longer with us.
Yeah.
But in fact, she was still here. And there's a really amazing quote by Rumi that says, goodbyes are for those who love with their eyes, because for those who love with their heart and soul, there's no such thing as separation. And
Nice.
so all these moments of serendipity started showing up. There was a cardinal at my window, which is reminiscent of, a soul that's coming to revisit you.
Yeah.
My daughter started saying love never ends. It's her
Oh,
favorite phrase. And so it
wow.
was a reminder
Yeah.
that, and she drew it all on different cards and things. She gave it to my mom. And so we created t-shirts that said love never ends to
Oh,
remind us.
yeah.
And then there were other moments when my mom passed away. I got in the car and I heard a song. It was the Stairway to Heaven. First song that I heard. I was literally the last person to be with both my father and my mother before they passed. And I was with my mom when she ascended.
Yeah.
And it was a really tough moment for me. And when I got in the car, I turned on the radio and Led Zeppelin, my mom
Yeah.
loved classic rock, Stairway to Heaven came on. And it was such a profound moment because I was crying,
Yeah.
I was yelling, I didn't know what was going on. It was almost like I went through the stages of grief right there in that
Yeah.
moment. But these moments kept coming to me, and it made me realize that, look, I need to reconnect to my purpose. I'm here to be an act of service and to help others realize that their dreams are capable and to help others realize that, look, we all have a gift in this world and it's up to us to give it away. So that was the first step. The second step was to rebuild relationships because I was stuck in the middle of Lexington, Kentucky with no friends. I created this men's group.
Yeah.
And then I created that safe space to share. And then lastly, I was able to reclaim my purpose. And when we talked about narratives and stories, really reclaim my story and say, look, I am here. I am a father. I have gifts to give, and I'm here to empower as many people as possible through my message. That when we connect, we can leverage that as currency to truly make an impact in this world.
That's beautiful. How old was your daughter, by the way, when she started saying love never ends? That's pretty powerful for a
So
kid.
she started saying that at about 2 or 3 and writing it on
Oh,
individual pieces of paper. I have one right over there. I could get it and show you. Actually, let me get it. I'll show you really
sure.
quickly. So she made this picture here. It
Oh
says,
my
"Love
God.
never ends. You're the best." And this
Wild.
is, I hang this in my office.
Yeah.
And so she started saying that and she started writing it and and we actually made t-shirts. It's on Instagram called Love Never Ends because I just thought it was such a special message.
Amazing. So
And
young. Right.
and so at such a young age, and now that's something we say and do all the time. And when I do keynote speeches, I throw out t-shirts with them on there, and like, so that everybody can realize that really at the end of the day, when you talk about negotiation and rewriting your story, it's coming from a place of love because you're negotiating who you are and your
Yeah.
highest commitments and realizing that you matter and that the love that you have to give, it's important.
Yeah.
And so sometimes Chris Voss, I don't know if you know him, he's a
Yeah.
negotiation expert. He talks a lot about, it all starts when somebody says no. When they say no, great, I know that I have a starting point.
Yeah.
Because then we can dig in deeper to what the loves are, or what the
Yeah.
non-negotiable, or what are the key components. And so for me, when I work with a company or an organization, I want to make that negotiation a win-win-win for
Yeah.
all parties involved. It's the company, it's the consumer, and it's also the community. And I used to work at Disney, so I hate to say consumer. I say consumer, it could be consumer, it could be partner, it can be whomever. At Disney, it's guest, be our guest.
Yeah.
But that's where we can create that win-win-win when we truly connect to what we love most and what we desire and how to really reframe that story.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Jent's journey. You mentioned it in answer to the last question as part of your step number two. I mean,
Sure.
in a world where men are, historically at least conditioned to negotiate from a place of, dominance, power over others, or detachment, how does creating space for vulnerability shift the way that men negotiate relationships and or leadership or even their own identity for that matter?
Sure, I think it's crucial. So in terms of leadership and vulnerability, we've seen a growing trend, right? My father was of the baby boomer era, and a lot of people were very private in the way that they approach things.
Yeah.
And yet that was the old way of the world and the old way that things were positioned, where there was one job and there wasn't social media and there weren't all these other things that are kind of coming into play into the decision making that we have.
Yeah.
But as we progress, like we talked about before with AI, the human advantage to me, connection as currency is leveraging that human advantage by creating these relationships. And when you create these relationships and build with authenticity, then people can know and understand you and know that you are truly a visionary and somebody that will be empathetic and somebody that will fight for them. And so as we see a rise in AI and deep fakes and things along those nature, it's really important that if you are running a company or an organization and you're speaking up and building that story, vulnerability is critical because when you're at your lowest, that's where you need to take accountability and take it to its highest point. And so with Jent's journey, we focus on vulnerability for men so that they can be more vulnerable in their relationships, at work, and everywhere in between. And we have 7 pillars of manhood that we've created. One is focus,
Yeah.
so that we can stay present and purposeful.
Yeah.
The second is family, and that's your friends. It's your blood family and your other friends, so that we can surround ourselves with people that will support the positive stories that we're telling and help us. The third is faith, and making sure that we lead with trust and humility. And then the fourth is finances, because we all need to have finances and wealth and opportunities that can put us in a position so that we can afford to do the things we want and be around those that we love. Then the fifth is friendship. And that's where we have created this really cool tool that I'll come back to called the Journey Deck, where, we have to have loyalty and respect. Then we have fitness and then fun. And we love to say if it's fun, it gets done. So that's where it's crucial to,
Yeah.
we grow up and we forget, oh, we
That's
were
so true.
kids, we were children, and then society and all these other people come in and beat us down and say, oh no, you need to be important. But that's really where it comes alive.
Yeah.
We don't have the answers. No
Yeah.
one does. I mean, We just simply ask the questions so that you can come to the answers from yourself.
Yeah. Pretty solid foundational principles. I love that. And I'm so glad you mentioned about that inner child piece because I mean, in so many ways, kids are naturally amazing negotiators, right? They negotiate that best life. They show up with curiosity. They're not afraid to put themselves out there. They're not afraid of failure. They'll fall down and get back up again and dust themselves off. They're not afraid to ask, why? A million
Yeah.
times. They've got so many natural
My
gifts.
daughter is a better negotiator than I am. Like she wants to watch TV, she comes up with five different scenarios. I'm like, man, there's a lot to learn. And we get so frustrated sometimes, but these are the teaching moments. That's what I realized when I was in this, weekly group. Is like the guy who cut you off when you're driving on the road and you have road
Yes.
rage.
Yeah.
They're all teaching moments for us to realize, okay, that's an area where I need to sit back and have
Yeah.
empathy. And some might call them, a bad word. Instead of calling them a bad word, you can say, ah, soul,
Yeah.
instead of the other bad word that people may use. And so just moments so that we can come back to the present moment
Yeah,
and be aware of where we're at and be grateful for that moment and act without expectation.
I love that. Now, what you had mentioned a couple of times, but just before we got on, and then you mentioned now about your deck. Tell us a little
Yes.
about that because I want to make sure we get a chance to
So
do.
yes, so this is called the Journey Deck. And so after 150 meetings, we started to see that certain questions kept coming up and percolating, and then we were having deep discussions. So each week we get together, we have discussions, and we talk about what it means to be a man, or how are we different than our fathers?
Yeah.
And there's several things that we would go over, and we're like, wow, we really saw the value in that. And then we try to do a second group, and it went pretty well, but people were busy and schedules didn't align. So we said, this is probably a very easy, effective way. When you look at men, there's so many tools that they have. They have hammers. There's tools all around, but there's not as many mental health tools. And so we saw an inherent need there. You walk into Barnes and Noble, you'll see tons of books and things about for women, whether or not they're having babies or men's health, and it's a much smaller
Yes.
opportunity for men. And so we said, look, this is our mission. We really want to help men, live better, work better, and be better. So we created this card deck. It's called the Journey Deck because we're all on our own journey, and it's all driven through story. And so it's 52 cards. And like I talked about earlier about embodying things that you wanted to do when you got older. I love magic. And so when you
Yeah.
inherently pull out a deck of cards and say, pick a card, people always say, oh, it's like a magic trick. And it is magic because the
Yeah.
magic is in you and
Yeah.
the story that you share. And so our goal with this deck, I've taken it to fatherhood initiatives
Yeah. I love it.
where there was a man who was in and out of jail 3 to 4 times and he was tatted from head to toe. He pulled a card and it said, who do you have to forgive? And
Mhm.
he said, through tears, I have to forgive myself. And every time I reshare that story, I get goosebumps. You could probably see them on my arms.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, these cards are here to help foster connection. And it all starts with just a simple question. And we're too wrapped up in our technology or the push notifications. And so that's where we have this card deck. And I would love to ask one for you to tell me when to stop
Put
and you
me
can
on the
answer one.
spot here. Okay, hold
Yeah. And I'll share mine too if you
Yeah.
want.
Well, and I just want to say, just before I pick a card, it was interesting when you said the question about that scenario, because the immediate thing that came to me when you said, who do you have to forgive? And I don't even know why or where, but my immediate response was myself. So that's interesting that that was his as well.
Yeah.
You
And
want,
it's something too for men. Oftentimes there's this confrontational element where somebody will look at you and say, "Hey," so one question, when was the last time you cried? And if somebody looks at you and said, "When was it?" You may feel ashamed or looking, but if you have the card, especially when we do it in a circle
yeah,
environment,
I love it.
because it starts and ends and it's all an infinity, you
Yeah,
have a card and the card's just holding you there and it allows you just to not feel so intimidated in that moment. And
yeah. Okay, give it. I'm on the
tell me
spot.
when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. This one is how do you foster how do you foster relationship with friends and family?
How do you foster?
Yeah, how do you
Good question.
foster deeper
Okay.
relationships with your friends and family?
Well, again, I'm a big believer in going the very first thing that popped into my mind when you said that was quality time. I think we often get so busy in this to-do world that we don't have the same connection that we used to. Think when you're a kid, you spent inordinate amounts of time
Sure.
those people that you cared about. So for me, I would say fostering quality time first, going back to I think an earlier answer that you talked about that building trust, like just always be honest, always show up in integrity, always be vulnerable and create the space for them to really be vulnerable and to trust you back. Those are the things that jumped out at me when you.
Yeah, I love that answer. One of the things my mom always used to teach me was, we always want to sit down and eat dinner together.
Yeah.
And I think it can get harder, right, when we have different schedules. And another thing she would always say is like, don't ever let anybody eat alone. Like if you can be there with
Oh,
them and spend that time with them, that's one thing that I pass on to my kids. And having that time together, we watch America's Got Talent.
yes.
That's our favorite show, especially for me because I'm in the business of helping others achieve their
Yeah.
dreams by rewriting that narrative and then writing, the story that they want to see. And when we sit down and watch America's Got Talent, they'll always look over to us, and my wife and I will be inherently crying when they hit the golden buzzer or we
Oh,
see an
yeah.
amazing performance. They'll ask us, and to me, when I talk to them, it's like, look, this is the American dream. You have the ability, any dream really, to achieve your wildest dreams if you only let yourself go there and don't self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And so when we watch those shows, it's always a special moment for
Yeah.
us. And
I love that. I'm going to think of it differently now. I think it was sort of at the back of my mind, but you really crystallized that for me, Steve, watching those shows and recognizing people living into their dreams. And when you see the nervousness and the fear and the vulnerability putting it out there, it's a whole new perspective on the show.
and you'll see the people who are on those shows that are typically the most successful, they don't just get up, do their little
Yes.
trick or talent and then leave. You're really going to feel the story behind them. There's a guy called Jordan Blue on the most recent
Oh,
season.
yeah.
He was a
Yeah.
busker and he comes from Nashville and he just had
Yeah.
a baby. Or Jessica Sanchez, who was there as a young child and didn't get the award, but came back 20 years later
Yeah.
because she continued to move forward and believed in herself and rewrote the narrative in her head. And one way I want to urge too for your listeners is there's a growing trend for this thing. It's called a mind movie. It's similar to a visualization board, but as you begin to figure out what it is that you want, you can come forth with visions. Obviously, write down a journal entry to yourself a year later, having already achieved these goals that you put in place. But then you can create a mind movie where you come up with different images or things that you ultimately want to achieve.
Yeah.
You can use a platform called Canva, which a lot of you probably know for
Yep.
social media, and then figure out what is the song or two songs that really motivate you and really inspire you, where you feel like Michael Jordan. And when you're done, you say yes, and you feel like it's possible. And we don't need to know how to get from point A to point B,
Yeah.
just need to know where you want to go to. But then you create this video, put the music underneath, you download it, and then every morning it's similar to a self-affirmation.
Yeah.
You watch that video and you get inspired and you allow these things to start to take shape. And
Yeah.
so that, like you talk about the art of negotiation, where you're bringing yourself closer to the sale, you're bringing yourself closer to the dream, and you're bringing yourself where you really are truly connected and where you're best served in this
Yeah.
world so that you can help others.
I love that idea. I've never heard it quite that in that detail, and I think that's a game changer the way you presented it. Now, I want to make sure I know you were going to wanted to share, and I can't believe how fast our time has gone. I'd mentioned earlier you've done so much, I'll have to have you back, and I think I will have to have you back. So we're
Sure, I'd love to come back.
halfway through the stuff I thought we'd touch on, but there's just so much value here. You wanted to leave a question
Yes.
with the
So one of
audience.
the things that I wanted to talk to your audiences really quickly is, to the world, you might be one person, but to one person, you might be the world. That was a quote that stood up in my mom's kitchen. And through the power of question, through the power of connection, there's a couple of things like anytime you're out and about, look to the stranger next to you, look them in the eye, say hello, ask them their name. The power of the name is just 10,000 fold, or ask them, who were you named after?
Yeah.
Just make a friend, a stranger, who knows, they may be a friend for life. But I also wanted to just share a couple great questions. What's your favorite
Yeah.
sandwich? What was the first concert you went to? Different things like that that can allow you to connect. But I'm going to pull a card, one more card for the audience. And what I would love is for the audience, if you're listening, think about the answer to this question and send the answer to somebody else, or you can send the question to somebody else and simply leave them a voice note or call them, but do not text them. I would love for you to leave them a voice note so that they can hear your voice and have a deeper sense of
Yeah.
connection. Because oftentimes things can get lost in a text message, or better yet, FaceTime them.
Yeah.
We have that technology in our hand where you can experience somebody across the globe. So the
Yeah.
question is,
And hold on, just before you do that, grab the question. For our listeners, I want you to again take a pause because we get so caught up in that to-do life. Really listen to this question, and I challenge you to make a promise to yourself that you're going to follow up. Make that commitment to yourself. And we've talked a lot today about doing what you say and saying what you know, what you are. Make sure that you're listening to the question, jot it down if you've got a moment, or re-listen to this piece because I challenge you to do it and ask you to comment back on this episode and let us know that you've done it. So go ahead, Steve.
So the question that I have here, and this kind of goes along with the TEDx talk that I did. It's called The Hidden Power of Grief. You can find it on YouTube. But the question that I have for you was, when was a time that something bad turned out to be good?
Mm,
And like we do, like a haiku, what we do in our Sunday meetings that I do. If you guys are interested in the Meditation Hill Sangha, it's free. You can reach out to me. But when was this time something bad
I love that.
turned out to be good?
Gosh.
And when you have that story or that moment, share it
Yeah.
because that's how we truly can connect on a deeper level. And that's how you can inspire one person. You might not think that somebody resonates with it, but truly, those moments of adversity are what allow us to become inspired and empowered by, your valiant
And
efforts.
it helps us rewrite our stories. And when we share the question with others, it helps them rewrite their stories without even realizing it. I think that's gorgeous. So I normally
Yeah.
like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life? Doesn't have to be about anything we talk, one of those aha moments. I mean, you've shared so many here, frankly.
Yeah. So I've had a lot recently. I met with a woman. She does like she's a coach. And she talked about somebody did a talk about people won't remember who you are, what you do, they remember how you made them feel. That was Maya Angelou. But there was another woman that does a talk, and she calls it a 200-year lifespan. And she's like, after the 200 years, like you can probably remember your great grandmother or maybe a little bit past that, but we're in this like 200-year frame of when we will be remembered. And that's where it's important to us or for us to build a lot of these lasting legacies, and podcasts and things are all out there. But as I looked into that, I started thinking a lot more about my own self and my career trajectory. And I started to realize that for me, it was 20 years.
Hmm.
Like there's no such thing as an overnight sensation. All the things that I worked really, really hard to put together took me 20 years.
Yeah.
It took me 20 years to get a TEDx talk made.
Yeah.
It took me 20 years to tell the story of my best friend's father, who was an FBI agent. That's what I made my number one podcast on Apple. It's called Wolves Among Us. It took me 20 years to get that made, and I tried that hard.
Yeah.
And then as I started to just look back, things don't happen overnight, but all you need to do is take the first step. We live in this fast-paced society. Just give yourself time, give yourself freedom, and give yourself the flexibility to allow you to be who you are, but to allow these things to unfold because they will take time.
That's great advice, especially in this instant gratification society. I interviewed somebody recently talking about the power of the delay or some delayed gratification. It was an eye opener. So where can people learn more about you, Stephen?
Sure. So if you want to check me out, you can go to stephenseidel.com and I'll spell that for you. That's STEPHENSEIDEL.com. And if you are building your own career or negotiating or wanting more exposure, I have a free PDF. So if you go to stephenseidel.com/media, there's a PDF where there's 4 free platforms where you can really start to work on your voice and how you're presenting yourself. And there's journalists that are looking for queries. There's also a podcast platform that can help you reach other amazing people like Cindy to be on their shows. And so Stephen Seidel is my social media name across all platforms. And then if you're inspired by the work that we're doing, or you are, your husband, or you are a man who's looking for, more of a community to support you in your growth, I strongly suggest that you join us at Gent's Journey. We have a really amazing Substack that we built. If you go to gentsjourney.co/join, so that's gentsjourney.co/join. You can join up. There's about 6,000 gentlemen on there. We do regular posts, we
Wow.
host meetings. And then we also have this card deck, the Journey deck, that you can buy either from there or on Amazon. And it's a really amazing card deck that has
Yeah.
transformed my life. And I want to thank everybody for joining and go out there and make somebody's day. It's not that hard. All you have to do is say their name, smile at them, or open a door.
That's awesome. So powerful. And don't panic if you're driving at the moment or doing something and you're not able to get that info down. We'll make sure to include it in the show notes. So just check back there and do follow up. Steve's offering some free resources here. You've heard me say it before. I will say it again. When somebody is offering you resources that are going to help you on your journey, take advantage of them. Take that opportunity. Well, Stephen, this has been just such a great conversation. Definitely want to get you back to continue it one day. And thanks so much.
Thank you again, Cindy. I appreciate the work that you're doing to really help change the game out there. So thanks again.
Likewise, thank you. And for our listeners, I have no doubt there's just so much value in this episode. Please give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people in your life. This covers a there is nobody who can't get some value from this, whether the gent's journey piece, just your self-development piece, there's negotiating your best life. So do give that gift of sharing. And before we sign off, if this episode lit a fire in you and you are ready to stop playing small and start negotiating bigger, think about coming to one of my masterminds. I've got everything for you from one-on-one to online. I've got you covered. Let's tap into that feminine power of yours and start getting more of what you want and deserve without apology. If you're in, head to artoffemininenegotiation.com to check it out. Make sure to grab my book of the same name if you have not done that yet, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. And that's a wrap for this episode. So now go renegotiate the life that maybe you thought you had to settle for. And remember that every moment is a form of negotiation. So choose presence, choose power, choose purpose. Because I like to think this isn't just a podcast, it's a movement, and you're part of something bigger. So together we can redefine power one conversation, one negotiation at a time. Join the movement and lead the change. And please lead from your heart, negotiating like the powerful force of nature that you are. Because feminine doesn't mean weak, it means unstoppable, and we all have that power. Until next time, take care.